Hey everyone. Still preparing, 1 second. Hey everyone, it's Wednesday. It's time for The Doctor is In. And I'm missing my co-host at the moment. She was in surgery and is on her way racing to get home to get on the show. So she'll be here any minute. But I have four wonderful, wonderful people, and I'm related to one of them. So my daughter, but we're going to talk today about the importance of voting. And, this is a really important election for everybody, but there's so many issues on the table relevant to women and just to life in general. And so it's really, really, really important to get out to vote. So I'm going to let these amazing, young, beautiful women introduce themselves. And I'm just going to go in the order of my Zoom and let them tell you what they're doing, what they're working on, and how they're going to help you know what to do in November, or really before November, to get out to vote. Okay, so Kalisha, go.
Hi, everyone. Kalisha De Seuss Figures here. I'm Senior Advisor for Partnerships at When We All Vote, where I direct our partnerships department. We work on strategic ways to work with nonprofit organizations, corporations, community organizations, all around ensuring that every single eligible voter is registered and ready to vote. We are crystal clear on the goal of lessening that age and race voter registration gap in this country, and specifically focusing on increasing voter participation with young Americans and in communities of color.
Awesome.
So excited to be here with you today.
Great. I'm so glad you're here. Manna.
Great. Maybe, Mom, you could refer to me as Amanda on this. That would be
Amanda Brown Lehrman. Amanda Brown Lehrman. What's your name, girl?
I know. Secrets out. I am Ricky's daughter. I am also a managing director of Supermajority Education Fund, which is focused on turning out millions of women to vote, to make sure that we can aggregate and show our collective power at the voting, at the ballot boxes, and in this case, at your mailboxes, since we'll be doing a lot of vote by mail this year, but really making sure that we're elevating the fact that the majority of voters, the majority of everything in America is women, and we then therefore should have the majority of power as well. So have put out a series of majority rules, which is just that our lives are safe, our bodies are respected, our work is valued, our families are supported, and our government should represent us. And we really spend a lot of time focused on the super rule, which is the fact that the women's voices are never front and center. Certainly women of color's voices are not front and center, and really the people most impacted should be at the forefront of the solution. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today to make sure that we're lifting up these voices, lifting up every like beautiful Black woman on this call, all of your voices in this conversation, and doing our part to make sure that more people like us participate.
Awesome. Jayla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jayla Burton. I am the program officer at Breast Cancer Action, which is a nonprofit in San Francisco, California, with a mission to achieve health justice for all women living with breast cancer and women at risk of breast cancer. So this year, we are honoring 30 years of activism. We refer to ourselves as the bad girls of breast cancer because we are not afraid to speak up and call attention to all of the things that are going wrong, in whether that's in corporate America, in industry, and holding our government accountable. And our positions are very unique as an independent and rapid response watchdog, to contribute to the larger part of the breast cancer movement, in terms of that's targeting women in vulnerable communities. That means challenging science, and bolstering corporate control of regulatory protection agencies. And we also believe that getting to the root of the inequalities means that we are focusing on a system that is going to change, and has a diverse interplay of culture, power, economics, racism, and we do all things with a center of feminism. So also glad to be here today.
Wow. Okay. Nikidra. Uh-oh, we can't hear you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Nikedra Robinson, but everyone calls me Nike. I say like the goddess, not the shoe. And I'm the founder and CEO of Black Girls Vote. And so Black Girls Vote, our name says it all. We are committed to engaging, educating, and empowering Black women to use their collective voting power, particularly young Black women. And when I say young, you can be 80 and consider young, right? It's just something that we say. But we really, really do have young Black women who are in collegiate campuses and colleges all over the country. And we're expanding that to get more young, under our 30 years old, to be more engaged in the political process. So some of the disparities that we're talking about when we talk about healthcare, economic inequality, when we talk about education, those things are on the forefront of our vote when we go out to vote. And so it's not just about voting, but voting for who supports us and who's advocating for us. And so I'm so excited to be here. I'm with some amazing women just to talk about one, voting. As we know, we're 69 days away from the election. Us in the voting world, we know that, but some people, they're just focusing on it. We've been focusing on it for the last few years. And as things are coming, we're getting closer to the election. We want to make sure that Black girls vote, because we say it's a concrete fact that Black women vote. We know what happened in 2008 and 2012. It's Black women who delivered the presidency. In 2016, we know that 94% of Black women supported Secretary Clinton, and races since then. And in 2020, I'm very confident that Black women are going to show up and show out, but we want to make sure that policy and advocacy and our voices are not silenced in this election. So again, happy to be here.
Yeah. I feel like I'm surrounded with badassness. I love it. I love it. And probably if you added up all your ages, I'm still older than that, but whatever. I'll take it. So I always like to start with a little bit of data, for breast cancer, because I really believe that Black breast cancer is a different disease. And so in everything that we look at, I look at it as a different disease that needs attention. But listen to these numbers. So about 23% of Black women diagnosed with breast cancer have either no health insurance or have Medicaid coverage, versus 8% of white women. So 23% versus 8%. That insurance difference explains about 37% of the excess mortality of Black women. So, Black women are dying of breast cancer at a 42% higher rate than white women. And 37% of that is explained by lack of insurance. How crazy is that, right?
Yeah.
Another stat, 89% of white women were insured at the time of their breast cancer diagnosis versus only 74% of Black women. So we have a whole quarter of women that don't have insurance when they're diagnosed. And then two more, 54% of advanced cancer patients, and Black women are much more likely to be diagnosed at an advanced stage 3 or metastatic, right? But they refused or stopped treatment because of the cost of their treatment. They couldn't afford it. Just under half of all newly diagnosed cancer patients exhaust their retirement savings within a couple of years of their diagnosis.
Wow.
Crazy, right? And then the last one I'll talk about is nearly half of the minority women diagnosed with late stage breast cancer, so stage 4, were uninsured or on Medicaid. So the health care access and insurance thing is a huge, huge thing for breast cancer patients. And it's really impacting whether they live or die. Their life depends on this. So anyone want to speak to that? Anyone, you guys, free for all, go, whoever wants to talk.
I was just going to say, we did a bunch of research when we were first getting going with the organization last year, and just trying to learn more about women's experiences and really dive into the experiences of women of color just to better understand. And we, on this one study, I think it was something like 44% of Black women said that they had personally felt like they were discriminated against because of their race when they were going to a doctor or going to seek services too. And so I think health, like just the access to insurance is one thing, but just the idea of discrimination that you face when you are confronting these really difficult conversations, and just trust in the healthcare system and like trust that your doctors have your back is a whole other conversation that I think is just as important to lift up.
No, and I would agree with you there, Amanda. But I also want to talk about, economic equality, right? And a lot of us have access to healthcare because of our jobs, right? Access to good quality jobs. And so, hi, Dr. Gary. Hi.
Hey,
nice to
hi. It's nice to see all of you. I'm sorry I'm late. I was rushing right from the operating room, and I'm so excited to have you guys. Oh my goodness. Carry on. I'll jump in. I promise.
Okay, good. You know, I'm like, wait, gotta pause.
We have badassness all around Mo
Yeah,
today.
another
all
paying
around.
his join, so paying homage right to the doctor. But no, definitely. And so when we look at those disparities, when we look at a white woman or white men compared to black women, that's making 62.5 cents compared to a white man. And so those things and the economic inequalities that we're talking about that impacts our healthcare and quality healthcare and having access to health insurance. And those individuals who may not have good quality jobs, you may have to resort to a Medicaid or things of that nature. So I think at the same time as we talk about the disparities, when we talk about breast cancer, also talking about how do we make sure that more women, more Black women are getting those jobs, getting quality jobs and things of such so that they can have affordable, well, they can get insurance and that they can have the healthcare that they deserve. And a lot of times we know it's not that we're not qualified for the jobs, it's making sure that people are creating access and opportunities for us to get in those spaces and those places.
I love that you said that. I really do. And it resonates so much in medicine. You know, I just gave a talk last night on the historical perspective of racism in medicine, the historical context. And we talked a lot about the social determinants of health, both then and now, and how even when women have insurance, how and if they utilize that insurance and finding time and finding a ride to get your colonoscopy, making the time to get your mammogram, taking the time when you're the caregiver, when you may have children, you may have elderly parents, you may be the sole breadwinner. And all of these factor into preventive health practices as well. And making sure that, you know, we even work with, I know at our hospital, we are working with the hospital and with other employers to try to give people time off just to get those preventive services. You've got to use your PAL day and somebody's got to take a day off from work to get a colonoscopy for your screening. And so there are even barriers there in preventive care that we need to take into account and consideration. But having seats at the table and then understanding our worth is something that we need to talk about on a separate call altogether.
It's a whole nother one. I'm ready for it because we're tired.
It is.
Yeah,
you
we're
know,
tired.
I teach contract negotiation to young doctors, and you know, 70% of men will negotiate, 30 to 40% of women will negotiate. You know, they take whatever's on that paper and they sign it and they say, oh, I should be grateful to be here. And there's this huge, overwhelming.
Every time I have hired a woman and she doesn't negotiate, I'm like, I'm going to give you another $5,000 and you should have asked for it and never do this again. Like,
It's
make
like
sure
an angel loses its wings every time. You don't ask for what you deserve. You don't ask for the educational time or the stipend or the vacation, the promotion, the raise, you know, and it's so important to bring that up. And I love that you are in this space.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important that we have, I'm gonna say one thing, it's so important that we have people like Amanda in those rooms and spaces because she's advocating for women and Black women. So if we're not in those spaces, someone else would not give her that opportunity. So I just wanna lift you up and commend you, Amanda. I'm sorry, Kalisha, if I jumped you off.
No, that's good. Amanda, the point you made before, just talking about Black women and their perceptions of the healthcare system and how they'll be treated within and disparate treatment, I think is an important one. A colleague of mine posted the other day an article about this Black man, PhD, who thought it was so important to list his accomplishments and his resume as he was like walking into a room just to let doctors know like, hey, I'm qualified, I'm smart, don't mess with me. And it brought me back to my own experience of being pregnant and going to my appointments. And I feel like I felt secure wearing my Yale shirt to those appointments because I felt like folks would look at me a little bit differently and understand that like, I know if you're going to treat me differently in this process. And I didn't realize that I was doing that until seeing that article of just walking into the room, you know, you're walking in with almost a deficit of how, you know, the system might treat you.
I took a slightly different approach. And when I went to go deliver my second girl, I wore my Planned Parenthood Trust Black Women shirt. And I was like, don't mess with me.
Not today.
Like, here I am. And that was what I labored in.
I love it. I just tell people, sorry, go ahead.
It just sucks that we have to do things like that.
Oh, yeah. And think of the women who can't do it, who don't have the Yale t-shirt, who don't even know to get there. You know what I mean? There's so many of us that you know, aren't as fortunate and are also in a community hospital where they don't really care anyway. They've gone through pregnancy with going to a clinic, and now they're in labor. They're with somebody they haven't even met with before, and they're having a baby, and they're having to, you know, fight for their lives, which is crazy, right? But that happens so much more often than not.
No,
I go incognito. I don't tell anybody what I do. Oh, I work in healthcare, and as soon as you start asking a couple questions, people piece it together, or they Google you. But I prefer to see how I'm treated when you don't know what I do. You don't know that I'm a director of a cancer program. You don't know that I'm a surgeon. What are you saying to me, and how are you explaining things to me? And the dialogue is very different. It's not necessarily a higher level of understanding, but there's a difference and a recognition when someone works in healthcare, or when they're a colleague, or when they're, you know what I mean? And I think that, and it's that same recognition when a Black patient, or one with breast cancer comes to see me and she sees a Black female surgeon. It's like, wait,
Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
There's this space, and there's this interaction that's unspoken. There's this connection that says, you know what, okay, I'm going to listen a little more closely, and I'm going to consider what she says, and I may consider this clinical trial, and it's so important, and that representation matters, but it is sometimes and many times absent, especially in academic centers. And we find that patients who have diseases like breast cancer are more likely to seek care in their community settings because they feel ill at ease in the larger academic institutions. And in the community settings, they are less likely to be offered things like clinical trials. They are less likely to have navigational services and advocates and ombudspeople who can, help them to get the services that they need. And that's what we really, that's the work that we have to do, I think, Ricky, as we grow this organization, is in training advocates and navigators and people who can help in that regard. And I want to ask you guys a question, because you are you're the experts on this, but when we talk about advocacy and mobilizing for advocacy and awareness, I wonder if you could give some tips, some pearls, and some advice for people who might be watching, who are thinking, you know what, I've finished my breast cancer journey and I want to get involved. Where does that happen, and how does that, is it local, is it national, is it, through organizations? But what advice would you have for somebody who just wants to, this election cycle, get involved in advocacy for breast cancer, partisan aside, politics aside, they want to advocate for resources, for funding,
for health insurance,
for insurance?
I think it starts, and I'll let folks get into more of the advocacy pieces. At When We All Vote, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, but it starts with voting and getting your community out there and registered to vote. If you care about these issues, if you care about health, if you care about the Black community, and if you understand some of the statistics that, my friends on the phone shared about impacts, for Black women and the Black community, then the best way to show up is to vote. Vote about what you care about, have your voice heard. And so 2 very clear calls to action right now, or I guess 3. 1, I want everyone to ensure that they're registered to vote and their voter registration is updated. 2, it's so crucial that you're making your plan to vote in this election. You have to be intentional. I have my calendar marked October 26th. I'm voting early and in person in Maryland, voting by mail. Make your plan, know your options. And 3, there are a ton of ways to get mobilized, to mobilize your community, your family, your friends to ensure that they're registered to vote. And so you can join us at whenweallvote.org to learn more about a number of different opportunities to mobilize your community. But there's no better way to advocate for what you care about than to make your voice heard at the ballot.
I just want to jump in, and I'm sure Nike can say even more about this, but women are innate organizers. And the reason that Black women always hold elections down is because we do what we do best, which is just tell our friends and our family to do the right thing. And those conversations matter so much. And I think people sometimes, they get intimidated by the word organizing. They get intimidated by what is mobilization, what's an activist, what is advocacy, and it's like, that's a whole other job. I don't have time for that, but it's so much of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Just think of the text chains that you're on with your friends from high school, or when you go to the grocery store. I mean, it's a little bit harder to do this now, but I talk to everyone in line, you're picking up your kids from school, and again, you're talking to people, and those conversations have such value. And everything that Kalisha just said, when you're talking about the things that matter to you, putting it, giving your story, sharing your personal story about why these things matter, why these issues matter, why people should care about them. That it just has such a tremendous value to that I think people sometimes underestimate their own power as an individual even, and their own voice in that work. And I just want to state that there's so much power in our voice and those little conversations, the things that you post on social media, the things that you send in WhatsApp or text messages in the middle of the night to your friends. Like, it's about putting your own oxygen mask obviously on and making sure that you have your plan to vote, but then making sure that everyone in your community has that plan too.
And Amanda, that's what we do as breast cancer survivors. Our sharing of our stories is how we all connect and how we motivate each other and help each other to do stuff that's going to benefit us. So the story sharing is so important because everybody has a story, everybody has an experience, and everybody has a health story. I mean, our family, we had, I had breast cancer, but you were all in it. It's a family disease. So sharing all that. I was going
to say to Dr. Gary, when you were talking earlier just about having advocates, my sister and I, when my mom was sick, because we would take her into the doctor office and to her, fairly, she would be very emotionally charged in those doctor visits and would only hear certain things. Yeah. And so we needed translators and advocates for her in those conversations. And so my sister and I would oftentimes do this act where like one of us would choose to be the slower one or the stupid one that day and always ask the doctor to repeat themselves. And I'd be like, sorry, I missed that. Or like typing on, like texting something and then like tune back in or ask a question in a different way just to make the doctor say the same thing 5 different times so that we could hear it. And we totally had this like act down for every doctor appointment, but just making them say what they needed to say a couple of different times mattered so much, and it was helpful for us. Yeah,
that is incredible. I absolutely love that, and I'm gonna use that and pass that along to breasties and family members, and I'm gonna do that myself sometimes. I think I'll try to be incognito and ask that question again. But let me ask you guys
to add to that really quickly. And I think what Amanda mentioned, as well as what Ricky mentioned, 2 things I just want to uplift is that, Amanda and her sister had a strategy, right? And those are some of the things that we have to do in this tactics. And we know as Black women, we have to get creative. But then Ricky made a good point. There are some people who may not have family members or support. Right. They can go there and support them. And so, and I stand here on the shoulders of Fannie Lou Hamer, who was sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And so many times when we talk about Black women, we're tired. We're so exhausted. We're trying to figure it out and all that. And so start small when we talk about organizing. And organizing is not a dirty word. Policy isn't a dirty word. Advocacy isn't a dirty word. And we think it's so high level. And then I had to realize I never had an interest in politics, never thought I would be working in this field. But then you realize it's only doing what you think is right, right? And your right is your right. And so that's picking up the phone, calling your elected official, because what we have confused is that they work for us, right? And so if you have anyone who applies for a job, they are applying for a job, which is on typically a 4-year probationary period, unless it's Congress. And after 4 years of probation, if you don't like them, then you hire someone else, just like your job, Dr. Gary, just like my job. All of our jobs is on probation, but they work for you. And I think it's so important that we empower people and let them know that these elected officials work for us. So therefore, when you call them and say, I want to make sure that we're getting funding for research on breast cancers, why is sickle cell impacting more Black people? Where's the funding for XYZ? Fibroids within Black women, all these issues, they have to account for that because they work for us. And so, and sometimes you may feel, lonely and isolated on the island because you don't have people to support you, but there are so many women and there are so many networks that you can tap into for people who want to support. But again, back to what Kalisha said, we have to vote, and knowing that when we do vote, you're going to the polls as an educated voter, or you're voting for the person who supports you. Partisan aside, it's not about being Republican, Democrat, independent, who supports your policies and who supports your community, which is so critical. And I know Jayla has been trying to talk. So Jayla,
I know, poor Jayla. I was going to say, you guys, let Jayla talk. Let Jayla
jump in here.
All that knowledge. So Jayla, I'm just going to pass it to you.
No.
I think this is like going off of the energy of like us being a village right here and talking about all of this is like we need a village when it comes to advocating for patients in a clinical setting and advocating for ourselves as Black women when it comes to implementing policy. So it's like, and Breast Cancer Action is an advocacy organization, but also as a Black woman, you know, I have this identity that sometimes makes me feel like I don't have the capacity to pay attention to certain issues that are really important. So that other really big step before you can even do the advocacy is doing the education piece and making sure you're monitoring your representatives, seeing if they're supporting bills that are in alignment with you, whether they're if they're supporting racist policies, classist policies, or policies that are environmentally unjust. And in terms of breast cancer, so what does that look like? Asking, is this person that I'm going to vote for going to produce the best outcomes for me and my community, no matter what that is? And there's a lot of policies in place right now that are breast cancer oriented that don't seem like they would be. For example, we're working in California to eliminate fossil fuel production, which has been linked to a lot of linked to estrogen disrupting chemicals, dioxins, et cetera, that increases risk to breast cancer and a lot of other diseases. So one, it's about figuring out what it is in your community that you care about, where that means locally, what's going on, and seeing what you can do to change that and kind of challenge and hold policymakers accountable for what they're doing, and making sure that you're voting for people that will listen to what you're saying. And there is a clear track record of that. They show themselves very well what they do.
They do.
All the time. So
You're absolutely right. And I love those points that you brought up. And I want to circle back to make a point there, but I want to ask the inverse question of all of you. So not just for people who want to get involved, but what can you say to people who are watching, who have family and friends who have fatigue with all of what's happening in current events, and they are starting to tune out and turn off their TVs and their awareness of what's going on? How can we reinvigorate the people around us, or challenge them, or stimulate them to care about these things again? Any tips, any tools? Because I think that's really what we're up against is a bit of inertia and some lethargy, because we're just saturated with so much right now that we really have to be very deliberate and intentional about combating that and mobilizing our communities, you know? So any advice for people who might be watching, whose, you know, friends and family are like checked out?
I'll just start by saying, I'll keep it quick. Leadership matters, right? And so even in the midst of what's happening in our country right now, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, who would you want to lead, right? And who do you think would make decisions that would best benefit you and your community and your interests, right? And what the things and the people that you care about. But then don't just think about for you, think about the generation behind you. And when we show up sometimes, and oftentimes, you know, we show up, I think, you know, Congressman Elijah Cummings, you know, he said, I can't quote, you know, I'll get it all messed up right now, but we represent, well, we're ushers of the generation who'll come behind us, right? The things that we do today pretty much aren't even for the things that we'll see in this lifetime. It's for the people that come behind us. So when you are fatigued and when you get tired, you know, sometimes we can't even afford to be tired, right? Because of the sacrifices those for us and made. And so it can be frustrating, it can be exhausting, but don't be tired, be motivated, right? And be motivated to think about what's to come behind you. And when we look at leadership matters, representation matters. And so who's representing you and who's leading you into the next generation, not only for yourself, but for your children, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, and all of those people.
Yeah, my grandkids, her kids.
Yeah, I do think that there's like the old this is horrible, I guess, there's the old campaign, just like vote or die, and I think that there's a lot of power to that. And like, we talk to a lot of women right now, a lot of women of color that are so broken and are hurting so badly, that they literally can only think about how they're going to make it to tomorrow, how they're going to put breakfast on the table for their kids, and whether or not they're going to have childcare when they go to their hourly job, because if they don't show up, they're going to lose their job and not have healthcare, right? And they're like making these impossible choices. And I think it is really important just to think about voting is also about survival. And I think that there's motivation in that, but I think we also just have to be honest about where we are and where our country is and where our country needs to go and what leadership needs to look like. And in order for us to achieve that level of respect, you have to show up, and you have to show up and vote. And I think that that's a really important and also critical lesson that honestly we've learned time and time again what the consequences of that are. And we just can't afford, we literally cannot survive to not vote. And I think that I saw this actually Instagram post like 2 weeks ago that I was like, man, that is exactly right. Because I talk to a lot of women that are like, oh, politics is, like, I'm not political. And I'm like, that is such a place of privilege. Like, get out of here with that. If you think that politics is political, then like, I don't even know where to start the conversation with you. So like, I gotta sometimes rein it in. But I'm like, that is such a place of privilege. And I'm glad that you don't have to deal with the fact that, like, are you making critical decisions about paying for groceries or paying your car note so you can get to your job, or like how are you living in the world if you aren't facing these really difficult choices? And then I do think it all comes back to, and like that would be my like hard talk, but when I'm trying to be more inspiring, I would come back to just storytelling, because there's just so much value in sharing that personal story. There's a way to find make a personal connection with somebody about why that thing matters, to hopefully bring them out of that dark, sullen place where they feel alone and tired, which is also a very fair place to be. But I think when women talking to other women about what matters is one of the most compelling ways to get more people involved.
I also think about it like voting is almost like how you act right now during a pandemic. You wear your mask to protect yourself and to protect your health, but you also wear it to protect the people who are vulnerable, who are immune compromised, who are older, who are more at risk, right? And so it's not just always about, I started with vote your values, but sometimes it's not just always about just voting for you and your values. You need to vote for your community as well. You need to vote for the people who are not in the places of privilege that you might be in, right? You need to vote to have your community's voices heard, right? And so I think that it's critical. I mean, voting, this is not just about November. It's not just about presidential elections that happen every 4 years. Voting for the person who makes decisions, your DA, your mayor, your local elected official, your city council members. I think we also learned a lot through this pandemic of decisions that were made that impacted, is the bar open? Can people go out to malls? Can people be in these public places? Were made by local elected officials, right? And so it's really building a culture around voting, not sitting it out, because your community, your family is watching you if you do sit it out. And it's really building that culture around, it takes all of us to imagine that world, that stronger democracy that represents everyone's voice, right? Everyone's voice at the table. So I think it's just way more than just centering yourself in the process. It's really centering your community as well.
I absolutely love that.
It's also
like, that's so good. I'm going to use that one, Kalisha, the mask. But more importantly, you put your mask on first, right? And so you got to have your mask on, and then you're saving others around you. So thank you for dropping that gem, sis.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
Say also sometimes, and you said this just, Kalisha, like the presidential election only happens every 4 years, right? And people think about that as a moment. And it's just like the local elections, those local leaders have such a direct impact to your day-to-day life. And honestly, those races are won by like a couple hundred votes. And in some cases, like there are elections that are literally 1 vote difference, And so if you don't think your vote matters, like I will point you in the direction of all of those races that have been won by literally, you can count the number of votes, on your hand.
I think that should be a powerful tool that people could use,
Right.
actually. You know, if you had some examples of races that have been won with, you know, one vote or two, or, you know, something along those lines that people could go on your website and access as some fuel. And when we get into these discussions with our family members about why our votes don't matter, like if you
Right.
had that at your fingertips, 5 examples of whatever, I think that could be really, really powerful and impactful, especially if it impacts Black folks. Like
Yeah.
that could be huge. I noticed. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Like last week, Sabrina Fulton's race in Dade County, she lost about 331 votes, right? It's not 1 or 2 votes, but 331 people. We each know 301.
That's one family.
That's one
Right.
family, right?
We got more Facebook friends than that. We got more followers on Instagram than that. Come on.
You would endorse her. You were all nonpartisan, but just saying that that's the impact of just your friends. Like, that's not a lot of people in the grand scheme of things. And there's data around 1, but that's one person that we all know who she is. Trayvon Martin's mom, who experienced, you know, one of the most biggest tragedies of her lifetime, but she ran, in her way to combat that was like, I'm going to run for office. And then she had been running for well over a year, and then to lose about 331 votes, that's not a lot of votes, people. As you mentioned, that's our Facebook friends. That's our whole family that if we were to get out mobilized in that case. So I think that's so critical when we talk about the numbers. Everyone votes matter, and that's so critical that we, you know, continue to say your vote does matter. But
that's also a really important point to lift up, is just the fact that there are also really incredible Black women on the ballot at every level of the ballot as well. And so it's not about Democrat or Republican, but when you're able, I mean, just even thinking about what Barack Obama meant for Black people in this country, right? Like for a kid to see that we have a Black president, that means so much. And when you think about these Black women that are running, they're breast cancer survivors, their moms, their, you know, their sisters have breast cancer. It's just like, you can relate to that so much. And it's just, you trust that you can see yourself in them, and you just know that they're going to have your back. And so I think that's also a really important thing, just to, when you are thinking about, you know, or debating whether or not you're going to vote, when you're making your plan, you should also look and see who's on your ballot. Do some research. Like, there are incredible people that have been inspired by the events of the last couple of years that are making really incredible runs for office. And Sabrina Fulton is a great example of somebody that, you know, took that tragedy and was like, I'm going to do something about this. And there's just so many other really powerful examples, and a lot of really great women that you should look up.
And a really, just to tie that to the call,
Mm-hmm.
just to tie that to a call to action, when we all vote /VRH, which is Voter Resource Hub, has a ton of resources about how you can make your plan, and specifically how you can think about down ballot voting, who is on the ballot, what they stand for, so you can really not only make your plan to vote, but make your plan around how you're going to vote, not just for the presidential candidate, but down the ballot.
I love that. I love that you said that. And I want to follow up on a question with that. I do want to shout out some physicians. There are some Black doctors who are running at the local and national level that are making a huge difference, because they realize that, you know, we're not at the table, we're on the menu. And so they want to be the change, you know, and so I encourage people, just as you said, you know, to look down the ballot. And so this question could be somewhat beyond the scope of this conversation, but I got to ask it anyway, because on everybody's social media feeds, we always get those people who around presidential elections particularly have a problem with the two-party system, right? And so then you get into the whole group of people who start talking about this third party or other parties, et cetera. Can anybody give a little bit of insight? Like, we don't have to go on and on, but if those types of things were to happen, if these types of movements were to happen that could develop and cultivate into a different party, how much work is that? Where does that work begin? How can a person even just get excited and get involved based upon that desire, you know, get engaged with politics? What should they do?
That's a hard one.
It's a tough one because I get it, right? And I think so many times people don't want to feel like they're boxed in, right? I have to go Republican, I have to go Democrat. And I totally understand the frustration, but it takes time to build another party. And that's why folks say you're throwing your vote away, right? And so, and that can be extremely frustrating. Like, you know, daggone well, this person has no way, look at the data, right? Look at the data. In this particular election, a Green Party candidate cannot win, right? And so, not to take anything away from your vote, but realistically, how do you support the person who's likely to win the election? But I do think, not to take anything away from that, there is time you can organize another party, but the likelihood of that happening, how likely is that to happen? And it takes time and organize. And we've seen different parties, like, you know, people often refer to the Black Panther Party, right? And then so different parties trying to formalize to get political power. So I am not one at all that's against it. I think more people, particularly Black people, should be independent voters, just because I think so many times we need to talk about working for our vote. And so for me, I think it's critical that you have the conversations about policy, you have those conversations about who's supporting breast cancer and the funding and resources to come back to our community. But I think that's not a short-term strategy. I don't think in 69 days should we be talking about another party that could potentially win this election. That's not very feasible unless based on the data, but do I discourage people from looking at how to start another party? Absolutely not. But people are gonna do whatever they want to do, but that's what I would personally say.
But also, that's when you start thinking about, I'm voting for myself, but I'm also voting back for my community.
Yep.
This point earlier about the mask, you know, that I'm trying to protect myself, but I've also got to think of the impact of the community. So when I make my vote, I need to make a vote that's going to count and make a difference for everybody, not just myself. So
the only thing I'll add is specifically, just not directly answering your question, but building off what Nike said is that especially when it comes to Gen Z voters and young voters, how you talk to them about voting is really important, right? We all spoke about the importance of voting. We know that it's a lot of young people who are having these different feelings. We also know that there are more young people registered to vote right now today than were registered to vote in 2016, which means that they are showing up, right?
Yes.
But these kind of talkers around, you need to vote, it's stupid if you don't vote, you have to, like, Gen Z does not like being told what to do and given these ultimatum of like, you need to do it because I said so. And so we also need to think strategically about how we really, but there are a ton of Gen Z folks who care about different issues, who care about their community. So I think be really thoughtful, especially as you're talking to children and to young people, just about how you're having that conversation around the importance of voting and really figuring out what can really just close a door on that conversation and what can really meet people where they are.
Yeah,
I love that.
To their needs, right? Because they're voting. Go ahead, Amanda, you go.
I was just going to say, when I was the political director at Rock the Vote for a couple of years and did a lot of work to make sure that young people were turning out in elections, which is a lot of education, a lot of registration work. And one thing that's also true that doesn't necessarily, I mean, young people, it's like a thing to not be put into a box, right? So you don't want to be labeled a certain way. So to Kalisha's point, yeah, you got to be careful with that. But this is where I think we have to also put some level of accountability on the parties and on our elected officials and on candidates and campaigns. Like, the reason that young people don't support them is because they don't freaking talk to young people, right? Like, they go to a nursing home way before they go to a high school or to a college campus. And, that it's a little bit of just like, I don't know, like, it's a cyclical thing, but I do think that that's also a challenge that you have to put on candidates and campaigns to make sure that they're talking about the issues that young people care about, which is every issue, because at the end of the day, young people are the most affected for the long, it's like that is their whole future. And I think we sometimes don't put the sort of like direct that at the right person. And there is a lot of responsibility and onus on candidates. If you want young people to vote for you, then you have to engage them and you have to talk to them and meet them where they are.
And I think it's
a big factor for them as well, for young people, right? The whole health insurance thing, access and coverage.
Especially when you talk about things like breast cancer and access to screening, access to diagnostic imaging. There's a huge disparity there because the data would suggest that postmenopausal women should warrant more of these things. And so we have these guidelines that tend to sort of exclude, or they put the younger patients in the asterisks and the margins. And we find that it's not covered as much. And there's a lot of advocacy that has to go on for young women facing a breast cancer diagnosis. But I want to circle back.
Yeah,
real quick.
And I was just gonna say I have such a personal testimony on that with like, given my family's history, I've been like telling my gynecologist, I'm like, I need you to take me seriously. I need you to check my boobs, you know, like I want every screening right now. And I remember getting into a fight with a doctor that was just like, oh, your mom had breast cancer post-menopause, so like you don't need to worry, and you should just, you're on track, you'll do this at year 35, you know. And I was like, okay, but what do I need to do to get this done sooner? And I've had to like use some other resources to explore those options because my own doctors weren't going to take that seriously.
That's right. Or find another doctor. Absolutely.
That happens every day, Amanda. I mean, so many young women are dismissed by their doctor, and at least you knew better to fight for it. But so many don't. They walk away, and the doctors come back in 6 months, come back in a year, they come back and they're metastatic. That happens so often. It's just horrible. So that's a whole area. You guys, there's a couple comments in the questions in the comments about voter suppression, about the whole male thing. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? A couple people have asked about that.
I'll add something to it, but I just wanted to, I cannot not say this, but that's why it's so important when we talk about we need more Dr. Garys in the rooms and spaces, right? And making sure that we're putting more Black people, more Black women in these positions to be doctors so that they can hear us and they hear us loud and clearly. So I definitely wanted to just, just uplift her in this space. You just heard, she just came out of surgery. But that's so critical that we have more people like her in those spaces and places. So they are listening to us and hearing our cries as Black women. So voter suppression, I'm transitioning to that, right? It's real, right? It is relevant when we're talking about vote by mail. Kalisha mentioned it. You have to have a plan. Checking the status of your voter status. We saw what we saw in Georgia in 2018. It's unheard of, but it's real, right? And so
where do you go to check that real quick? Because I missed it.
We recommend vote.org.com. You can check the status of your registration. You can register to vote, all those things just to check right now, just to see, because you may not realize that you're not active on a voter registration file. So I think there's so many things that are happening, and you combat that with education, right? Making sure that you have a plan, you're prepared to vote, whether you are going to vote by mail this election. Look at the process. Each state has different laws and put in place to look at your state and making sure that your state and what's needed for your state to make sure that you can get out to vote. And I'll let someone go in more detail. But if
people are playing real dirty and just have to name that. And it's like, literally, if you haven't voted in the last 2 elections, which sometimes are your local elections, they just purge you from the rolls and you don't even know. So then you show up on election day and the registrar says like, you're not on the list and you can't vote. And in many cases in that situation, people still are uneducated, so don't know that they do have an option at that point. But when somebody tells you that you're not allowed to vote, you walk away in many situations. That's one situation. There's also long lines is another that we've faced. I think in this situation with COVID, just thinking the fact that like you shouldn't have to choose between your health and voting in person is a real thing. And so we are doing a lot of work and I know a lot of folks even on this call are doing work to expand voting rights, expand voting options, make sure that there are in-person polling locations that you can go vote early safely, and hopefully you can avoid lines in that situation. You can explore vote by mail options in every single state, so highly recommend that. And yeah, I think the making of a plan is really important, knowing all of the different options that you have so that you can vote and bring your people with you, even if that is literally walking to the mailbox.
And you guys, we deal with a lot of sick people.
Yeah.
Even if they're sick, pack them up, put them in the car, put them in the wheelchair. If you have to carry them on your back, their vote still counts no matter how sick they are. If they don't feel that well, if it's a chemo day, bring them out. bring them all, bring all the, breasties. And I'm happy to go drive any breastie in my neighborhood to the polls or help them do a plan. So
Yeah, and hopefully you don't have to make that impossible choice and
right.
you do apply to get a vote by
mail.
mail ballot. And yeah.
Amanda
You know
spoke
what,
about
though?
a lot of ways that voter suppression shows up. And I just want to also be clear that like just confusion in general and chaos in general is a form of voter suppression.
Yes.
And just be mindful of that. And, I really want, as you're encouraging people to get their voices heard, like let's try and dim down a lot of that chaos and confusion, talk and really just talk about like, no, it is possible. You just go, you make sure you're registered to vote, you request your ballot, you make your plan, focus on these optimistic points of like, what is the path forward for folks voting, because the confusion and the chaos and the, should I now vote by mail? Should I do this? It is part of voter suppression tactics.
Absolutely. I think we have to make it as simple as possible. People can follow simple steps, have your backup plan. I love all of this. And Ricky, as you were talking, I had two thoughts, and the one thought would be even for people for whom, and not to be morbid at all, but this could be your last election that you're voting in. Maybe you're a nonagenarian and you're 95 years old and you think, okay, this might be my last one and my vote doesn't count. It does. It absolutely does for the patients who are not feeling well, et cetera. That vote matters for so many patients behind them and beyond them, and so many family members. And the second thought I had about this was, as you talked about rounding people up, I think a great way to perhaps utilize resources as advocacy groups for breast cancer patients might be to look into some funding to start to be able to offer rides to voting polls and things, depending upon the areas. If there are large areas of cancer patients, concentrated, we might think about how to begin to use resources and apply for grants that could help, cancer patients especially mobilize to the polls, So it's a thought, perhaps not even for this election coming up, although that would be ideal, but, for the future, how can we use our voices and leverage our organizations in that way as well?
And put pressure on.
I'm sorry, really quickly. When Ricky said there were so many people, some of the people are listening, maybe just had a chemo day and who are tired. And that goes back to, being able to vote by mail, requesting that ballot, but you never know by you just posting it that you did vote by mail. We're so inspired by your strength just going through chemo already, but you're inspiring so many other people that you're still being active in your civic duty. And so I just want to uplift those women who are, even as you're battling, your personal health and other things, and you're still committed to other people in your community. And that's something that we should not overlook. And so I just want to say to women who are watching, I know it may not, we're optimistic about it, but we understand that, sis, you're not alone. Anything that we can do to support you in that voting by providing education and resources, all the folks on the phone, like When We All Vote, the things that Amanda's on at Super Majority, with Black Girls Vote, we want to be here and a resource to help you in this journey.
Yeah. JLo was trying to say something, I think. Poor JLo. We keep.
I'm sorry.
She's in California and we're all in Maryland.
I am just learning and listening, and we don't focus on a lot of like voter suppression and voter issues, but I think that it's all super relevant to the bigger movement and the bigger picture. So yes, thank you all.
I was just gonna say, one of the most amazing things about Black women is also that, and the reason that I think voting is so important within our community is just that it is a habit. And I feel like we've all sort of said it in different ways, where it's like, people are watching you, your children are watching you, take your aunties and uncles and cousins with you to the polls, right? And it's literally just such a habit for us. And that, to Kalisha's point about how we talk about voting and the importance of voting with young people in particular, just establishing that voting is a duty, but it's like you need to form a habit around it. And a lot of the work that we did at Rock the Vote was like, if you can get people to vote in their first 2 elections, you've made a lifelong voter because you've established that habit. And I just like thinking about that, even from as the matriarchs that we are in our families and our communities, and the ability that we have to educate everyone around us to make sure that they understand the power of voting and why it's important that that is a habit, is literally the most powerful thing about Black women also.
Well, we're all control freaks. We're all control freaks. You know, we all want to control. Like, I'm a helicopter mama, hello, and a helicopter grandmother, but that need to be in control is what makes us, okay, I'm going to control this too. I'm going to control what's in my life to the extent that I can. And
I
so
don't disagree with you, Ricky, but I look at it from a different perspective. You know, we have our acronym of GSD, it's a Get Shit
Right.
Done crew, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yes,
Black
yes.
women are the queens of getting stuff done.
right.
And I think that I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to maybe gather some breasties and do a PSA, you know, on
Yeah,
what
we'll do that.
voting means to them. And, you know, the importance of the vote and talking to their family, their children, to the community, to whomever, but really get some folks in the room just for, you know, 2, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, you know, a breast cancer patient who's going through chemo, talking about what voting means to them.
That's a
And-
great idea, Mo. You know, we could do that as part of our I Am Breast Cancer campaign. We've been making
Yes.
videos of women saying, I am Black breast cancer, and telling their story. They're on our Facebook page and our Instagram,
Mhm.
but that could be part of I Am Black breast cancer. So here's why I'm voting.
I think we got to do it soon though, so that
If
people will
anybody
have
wants
time
to
to
send me a
register.
video, send me a video. You know, Ricky at touchbbca.org. You know how to find me. Send me a video. I am Black breast cancer, and here's why I'm voting. Let's do
Mhm.
it.
I love that. You send them in, we will compile them, and we
We'll
will
post
make the PSA for
We'll
you.
post
So
it on our YouTube
if
channel. Yep, that's a
you
great
are
idea.
watching right now, please do send us a video. You know, less than 2 minutes, less than 2 or 3 minutes, because we'll have to edit.
Don't tell everybody. Don't tell everything, but give us a snapshot.
Just
Right.
tell us what it means to you and why it's important to you from the perspective of being a breast cancer survivor, thriver, metavivor, previvor,
Metathriver,
advocate,
metathriver.
family member,
Yeah,
all of it. Yep,
awesome.
absolutely.
great idea. Great idea. Coolio.
And I was going to donate some buttons to you just for you, Ricky, and some women that you just encounter. You know, people always ask me, can I have a Black Girls Vote button? So I'm going to send them to you, and you just give them out to whoever you see fit, Ricky, because I'm just so
Awesome.
inspired by the work that you all are doing as well.
Awesome. This is all Black Girl
Your
magic.
box
Well,
is
Black, you know, when we come together, we ESD, right? We just get it done.
Nike, we just moved, and I was unpacking a box and unpacked our Black Girls Vote box.
Take some pictures, tag us in it. We want to see it.
Elle has
Absolutely.
the sign in her room, actually.
Oh,
Great.
So cool. We're doing a part of the mailbox campaign. So folks, and we're expanding to Detroit, Maryland, and looks like Philadelphia to get people with these custom boxes to get them out to the polls and voting. So any of your folks in that area, we'll definitely make sure we connect with the folks there that you all have in your network to make sure that they get these customized boxes. I will make sure, we take care of you guys.
I'm in Philly. Let me know what I can do.
Really?
Back here. Yeah. So anything I can do.
Okay, absolutely. What's up?
Yep. You guys, you have a standing invitation. You're always welcome because we need to rock the vote here in Philly for sure. And I love what Audre Lorde said. She said, there are no single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives,
Right.
And when you think about voting, for the people who might be watching, who are on the fence or who are some of those, we need a different party people, begin. Do the research and begin to do the work and understand that it doesn't happen overnight. We didn't develop this majorly two-party system overnight. And so, what the work looks like is not the 2 months before the election saying what we need, and now we need something different. It's the groundwork and the grassroots to be able to build something for your children's children to have a different option.
Right.
And that begins with activism today and getting involved in that process as opposed to, pushing that process away and removing yourself from the political arena. And so I just encourage people who are watching who might have fatigue, who feel confused, who feel overwhelmed to stay in it, and to listen for the clarity. We'll try to put on Touch website some very simple steps to protect your vote. Maybe we ought to have that hashtag, protect your vote, and that way people can see what they need to do to protect the fidelity of their voting. Have your plan, check your polls, make your plan for mail-in, what are you gonna do if the weather's bad? How are you gonna navigate these things? Who's your ride? Who's your backup ride?
Yeah.
And all those sorts of things, like a checklist for them to be able to utilize. But how can people reach you guys? For
One more thing, Mo, one more thing before we go there.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about all the issues that are on the table. We talked about health insurance, but but clinical trial research, just breast cancer research, the cost of drugs, and help me with some of these, there's all these other issues that are on the docket to be talked about, and we should be asking questions of our leaders about what they're going to do about it. But health is a huge area for them to be focused on, affordability of drugs, affordability of care. So all those things there's like I have a laundry list here.
Legislation impacting breast density and what happens
genetic
there.
testing,
Right, hereditary cancer testing.
Whether your prosthetics are covered by your insurance.
Lymphedema treatment and treatments for things like neuropathy,
Right.
the many side effects of cancer treatment.
Right.
Your surgical options, there's so much that
So much,
is,
yeah.
that is able to be impacted through legislation.
Yeah, and we'll do a post about that. We'll do a post about that.
Yep, almost anything you can think of has
Yep.
some associated, potentially, some legislative action
Right.
that could be taken or that has been considered or that should be considered and introduced. So
Right.
it very much is tied into the politics. Healthcare and politics go hand in hand in this country in a very unholy union. It's not equitable and it's not fair and it's not what the people need. It's something other.
Right.
And I think
That's
that
how
we
you feed
have
your
to
kids.
be advocates for ourselves, for our communities, for our families, if nothing else, that's putting your mask on first and protecting your family's interests,
Yeah. It's just like I say about, I feel responsibility for our metastatic breasties. Like I can fight harder because I'm not. Same thing, I mean, we all have to do the right thing. So yeah, how do we find you guys? Kalisha, how can people find you?
Yeah, so I think the best place to plug in is to go to our website, whenweallvote.org. If you're interested, I run the partnerships department. So if you're an organization or know an organization that wants to get involved, you'll be routed to an email that'll lead to me and my team so we can figure out ways that you can get involved. If you're interested in volunteering on your own, there's a tab there to sign up to be a voting squad captain to get the tools, the resources that you need in order to make an impact in your community.
Cool.
Awesome.
At Supermajority, you can just go to www.supermajority.com and navigate through a bunch of different volunteer options as well. We just built out Supermajority Home, which is a place meant to be a one-stop shop. So you can get all of your information about checking your registration, who's on your ballot, where to vote. You can even request a vote by mail ballot, and then also sign up to do even more with volunteering opportunities, including things like being a poll worker.
Cool.
Yep, we're at www.blackgirlsvote.com. All of our social media is Black Girls Vote. We're excited that we will be opening up national membership next month. So for those people who want to be a part of the Black Girls Vote family and network, and also college women, young women on college campuses, even though if you may be remote or distance learning, we want you a part of the network. And so excited to be here. And I just want to add one last thing. Majority of us in the organizations that we're here and a part of are less than 5 years old, right? And so some of you who are at home and, sometimes, and for those who are breast cancer patients or just at home, and you may have this idea and you're just sitting on it. You don't know if you want to move on it. Shirley Chisholm said, you don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas. And we launched Black Girls Vote on her birthday to be honest, right? So that's someone who inspires me. And so I say that all of the women on this call have inspired me. We're all a part of amazing organizations that are fairly young, except I know Jayla, yours may be a little old, but just to see the work that Ricky and Monique have done and just building this amazing organization, Supermajority, When We All Vote, all that greatness. And that's what we do as Black women. We show up and we show out. So again, thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm Ricky Fairley. You can reach me on Twitter at Ricky Dove. All of our social media is Touch BBCA or touchbbca.org. And email me if you got a video. I am Black Breast Cancer. Tell me your story. RICKI@touchbbca.org. And
I'm Dr. Monique Gary on all social media, the Instagram, the Twitter, the LinkedIn, the Facebook, and apparently I have a YouTube page. So you can reach me for questions, for concerns, particularly related to these issues, for support, for connection to additional resources and breasties. And look at that baby.
that's Leah. That's our Leah.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, Leah. Hey, Lou.
It's
Hey,
no
Leah.
time. I'm being summoned.
There's a reason to vote right there.
Right there. I vote for Leah. I don't want
That's
her to ever speak the words breast cancer. That's my purpose. She's my purpose.
I love it. That's our reason. There it is.
This is my purpose.
We hope this has been relatable and reliable and real, and that's why we do this every Wednesday night. And so we are so thankful to all of you for joining
Yeah,
us.
thank you
I hope
so
that you
much.
will join us again.
Thank you so
and
much, guys. I love you guys.
Yeah, we can get into more of these issues.
Jayla didn't go.
Oh, Jayla didn't go.
Breast Cancer Action at www.BC Action. If you need help trying to figure out what issues are important to breast cancer, we have, since we've been around for a long time, we've been doing a lot of this work. So we have a lot of history about the issues that are relevant to breast cancer. We have a legislative toolkit that you can access. And also critical questions to ask when voting about breast cancer. And if you
Say that site again. I didn't quite catch it the first time.
www.bcaction.org. And then if you ever want to share a patient story, I'm program officer, grassroots organizer. So just reach out to me and we can figure out how to get the stories of all of our Black women told, because we will not be silenced and we will have a seat at the table.
Great. What's your email? What's your email?
jburton@bcaction.org.
Great.
Beautiful. We're coming to the Capitol when this is over. When
Yeah,
COVID's over, we can gather again.
Yeah,
You're gonna see
you guys, we're gonna do a walk, a virtual walk march on Black Friday. We're gonna turn Black Friday into Breasty Friday, because we can't go to them all. We're not standing in line at the, to get the cheap TV. So wait to hear more about that. But plan Breasty Friday for Black Friday. We're gonna turn it over and make it a walk and talk about breast cancer, get more people aware. So that's after the election, though. We got to vote first, right?
Vote for your health. That's right.
Vote for your health. Vote for
Go
your
for
health.
your health. Absolutely.
Thank you. Breasty love.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you guys so
Bye.
much for joining us. Take good care.
Take care.
Next
Thank you.
Wednesday night, 6 p.m.
6 p.m. next week. Bye, Lou. Bye, Leia. Blow kiss. Blow kiss, Leia. Blow kiss. Give me a kiss. Bye. Bye. Love you. Bye.